The following is my conversation with ENVE CEO Michael Stimola. Michael's a longtime entrepreneur. He started out in the early 80s founding Carbonite, a R&D materials company supplied carbon fiber tubes for use in manufacturing, healthcare, and aerospace. Michael then went on to found Sandvik Design-Build, a general contracting company that designed and built storefronts in the greater New York City area. In addition, Michael was a board member from 1997 to 2003 of Cannondale Bicycle Corporation, and we were able to dive into some aspects of that, which is very interesting. This was a time when Cannondale was a privately held company. He also started a franchise and licensed food concept store called Sandela's. He grew that from 0 to 150 stores, and he eventually exited in 2016. He then went on to take over as the Chief Executive Officer. The title was actually Turnaround Chief Executive Officer in 2023 for ENVE. This is where we really get to see some insight into how he was able to come in, really get his hands dirty, and help ENVE pull out of some of the turmoil that they were facing in the post-COVID environment. This is the Business of Cycling podcast. Mike, thank you for coming on today. This is exciting. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your story in the business, out of the business. ENVE, wonderful company. A lot's happening right now with ENVE. So I'm really glad you were able to make some time for us. People are curious about what's going on with the company and everything. So very excited to be able to talk. And so, yeah, thank you again for
Thanks
coming
for
on.
having me. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah. So I guess maybe just to get started, maybe tell us a little bit about, where you're from, kind of your early life. I know we'll talk about your early businesses, but for people that don't know, you're the CEO of ENVE.
Yep.
And maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you studied.
All right. All right. I am born and raised in New York City, and was I was born there. I lived in New York for maybe my first 6 years of my life. Then my father was one of those early move to the suburb companies leaving New York City, so we went to New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and I spent most of my childhood through high school in New Jersey, and then I went to school up in Connecticut, a small school called Quinnipiac University, and I stayed in Connecticut really after school for most of my life. I met my wife in high school when we were 16. We ended up getting married and living in Connecticut and raising our family there, and we lived there for, gosh, 40 years probably as a family. So yeah, that's where my early childhood. Now I live in my home is in outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Though I spend most of my time outside of ENVE's offices, I live outside of Ogden in Utah. I have a place that I live there too.
So what did you study in college, Mike?
I was a business. I started out with a marketing degree, and then I went and got my MBA at the same place, and I got an MBA in marketing and finance. And then I went to work. It's interesting that because out of school is where I kind of really started my first exposure to what ended up getting me to ENVE. I think when I got out of school, I worked for a company that's no longer in existence anymore called Union Carbide. It was top 50 companies in the world at the time,
Huge company.
and huge company. And I worked in a little group there that made carbon fiber. So it was called the Carbon Products Division, and I was a marketing and product manager for carbon fiber in the sporting goods industry. I sold carbon fiber to fishing rods, ski poles, tennis rackets. That was the early days of carbon fiber in the outside of the aerospace business. So yeah.
So you did sales, you were more on the sales side of things.
I was more on the, I guess I would say I was more on the marketing side. I was in the office. I didn't make a lot of sales calls. I went on sales visits, I'd say, as the young kid in marketing person in the company at the time. So yeah, I got exposed to some really interesting things though in that early job. That was my first exposure to carbon fiber, and we were selling product to mostly aerospace companies. So we go into Boeing and Morton Thiokol at the time, and some of these guys making rockets and parts for the space shuttle, things like that, were being made out of carbon fiber. and there was this kind of where you sent the garbagey carbon fiber to went into the sporting goods industry. The lesser product went in there, and I got exposed to a lot of the guys. It was a very entrepreneurial business. In the sporting goods guys making carbon fiber products were garage based, startup kind of guys, a lot of them. So kind of where I got my first exposure to carbon fiber.
So you were working with cycling in some way when you were working with carbon fiber then?
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked for Union Carbide, and I had this itch for carbon fiber. Also had an entrepreneurial drive at the time, and I still do. But I went and I started my own business making carbon fiber tubes, and I had seen them making these large, huge tubes for like space shuttle, the rockets that fell back to Earth in the old space shuttle days. Those were made on a big filament winding machine. And I remember seeing that and thinking to myself, I could do that on a little way, make little tubes. So anyway, I started a business. I was wildly undercapitalized, very enthusiastic, but wildly undercapitalized. And I started that business making tubes. And and I was in Connecticut, and so was Cannondale Bicycle at the time. They had just introduced the aluminum bike frame, and that's how I got first introduced to bikes. Is that I started working with Cannondale, a local Connecticut company to me, and doing R&D work, making carbon fiber frames. And that was back in the day when the bikes were made with aluminum lugs. So it wasn't a one monolithic piece. It was made with lugs. So I made the tubes, they made the lugs, and we built bikes and tested them back in the day.
So you always had this kind of entrepreneurial itch, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Like I, I do I have a feeling like when I was an employee for years, I remembered I would always kind of have my eye out, that'd be a good idea and that'd be a good idea. It's sort of, I don't know if that's the feeling, but it's you're always trying to you're bucking in a sense, like you're bucking what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I see that you started a company called Sandella's. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So that has a bike edge to it too. So I had the carbon fiber tube business. And as I said, I was wildly undercapitalized. And I ended up selling that business and to an aerospace company that wanted to make tubes. And I then got into the construction business, believe it or not. And I was building houses with a friend of mine who was a civil engineer. And as during that time, I had been working with Cannondale. I kind of got my first intro to riding, right, cycling in a bigger way. And while I was in the construction business, I went down to visit my sister and brother-in-law and my nephew. And my nephew and my brother-in-law and I went on a bike ride. They lived out, they had a house on the Chesapeake Bay, and we took our bikes, my Cannondale bike, and rode down to Annapolis, downtown Annapolis, where the military academy there is, and Naval Academy. And we went into this little shop to get a cup of coffee, and and I was sitting there holding this $5 cup of coffee. And this is one of those entrepreneurial things you're talking about. I'm sitting there holding this $5 cup of coffee, and I'm like, this has got to be a good business, right? I never paid $5 for a cup of coffee in my life. And I happened to meet the owner of that store. And I asked him about it. I said, gosh, this is great. You got to be thinking of building more of these, right? And he said to me, I'll never open another store in my life. And I said, really? How come? And he said, building this store was the biggest heartache nightmare of my entire life. I'll never do anything construction wise. And now, having been in the construction business, and I'm still young, naive guy, I looked around and I thought, this is the easiest construction job in the world compared to what we were building elsewhere. And that was that itch to me. It gave me that thing. And I can remember from then on, I went home and I started thinking about building one of these little shops. And I was in the construction business, building houses, had access to do that. 6 months later, we opened a little store in a mall in Connecticut, and we named it Sandella's. And we started out selling high-end coffee, and we evolved into really more of the food business than the coffee business. And so I got that. I mean, it's funny how I go back and I look at this thread of cycling in my life. If I hadn't ridden my Cannondale bike downtown Annapolis to go to this little place, I probably wouldn't have started Sandella's. So
So
yeah, it's just weird how things happen.
and Sandella's, can you give people an idea of like what Sandella's initially? You said it was initially coffee, but then
Yeah.
it developed into food. Like, can you give people some ideas about, you know, what the journey was there, just so people can understand?
Yeah, I opened a store in a mall in my first store in a mall in Connecticut, and
Was it a license or was it just an idea that you had?
no, it was an idea I had. My wife and I, designed the shop and had it built. And I was in that business at the time, so I knew carpenters and electricians and all. So it was kind of a side gig we did, building this little shop. And we got into how to make espresso drinks, and we it was kind of our side passion. And so we started doing that. We opened that store, and we opened it like in the fall, and it was as it came into the Christmas season, the malls were back then at least were crazy busy, and business was unbelievably good. It was amazing. And I thought, wow, this is like that shop. It's easy. You just open up the doors and people come in. Well, in the mall, come January, February, there's nobody in the mall back then. So I realized I need to go someplace where there's people all the time. So having come from New York, I went and researched it, and we ended up renting a store in New York City, downtown near the World Trade Center, outside the World Trade Center. And we opened a little shop down there. And I quickly realized with the rents I was paying down there, I couldn't sell just coffee. I had to sell something else because it was crazy expensive. And so my wife actually developed a line of sandwiches that we could sell in the store. And that's kind of got us into the food side. We started selling sandwiches, and then we evolved over time into making all of our food products out of flatbread. And at the time, flatbread was not very well known. And we started making all of our sandwiches out of flatbread. We started making pizzas, and the business quickly grew into the food side of the business, driving what we did. And coffee had always stayed as part of our business, but we became much more secondary. So that's how we got into the food side, and
And
we
how many
started building more and more
how, how
stores.
many stores are we talking about at the peak?
So at the peak of when I owned my own stores, we had about 10 or 12 stores, some in Connecticut malls and half a dozen or so in New York City. So I had one on Wall Street next to the New York Stock Exchange. We were downtown outside the World Trade Center. We had them all over and spread across Manhattan, and that was going great. And I thought I was still running the construction business at the time, so I had the two businesses going. And but then 9/11 happened, and 9/11 really hurt that business badly. Obviously, it we lost our stores in downtown Manhattan. The World Trade Center store outside was gone, and the store on Wall Street was gone. And
Like the one in the World Trade Center was destroyed, I presume.
my store was outside the World Trade Center. So when
Okay.
the tower came down, it just annihilated the space. And that store was, basically destroyed,
Closed
totally destroyed.
for months and months and months, imagine.
Yeah, never reopened.
Right. And
Never
then the one in
reopened.
Wall Street just was a matter of
It was
traffic or
closed. No, so the city of New York took over all the buildings around the New York Stock Exchange by eminent domain. They went in and took control of all the buildings, and because they needed to have they wanted power. They needed power for the New York Stock Exchange to reopen, so they just wouldn't allow power into any other buildings around the area. So plus New York City became desolate at that time. After 9/11, people didn't go to work. I mean, people worked from home, and people are afraid to go to work. So the I lost basically within about 6 months, we lost all those stores in New York closed. And we were teetering on the edge of, I remember my attorney telling me at the time, well, you should file bankruptcy. This isn't your fault, but you should file bankruptcy and just recover. And I wouldn't. And looking back on it, I'm not so sure that was a good or bad idea, but we didn't. We said, we'll figure it out. And we did. We it kind of ties back to other things that I've done. We sat down and I said, you know what, we got a great product. It's not our fault that 9/11 happened. And what we did is we reformulated the company to be a franchise company. So we didn't have any capital, but we had a great product, a great idea, and we started selling franchise stores to people. And again, I got lucky. My first store, franchise store I ever opened was on LSU's campus, and it opened in a like a student union kind of building on campus. And I was shocked that that store did almost the same volume as we did in New York City down here in
Manhattan.
Wall Street in Manhattan. But you know, there's 40,000 kids went to
Right,
that university, right?
right.
Plus probably 20,000 faculty and staff. So there was this enormous amount
Every
of
day,
people,
every day.
and it opened my eyes that wow, we could do this, right? So we ended up we kept growing that business. We ultimately had about 250 stores around the US, and
Franchising.
I franchising them, and a lot of them were on college campuses, some in airports, but they were in more kind of non-traditional kind of locations. And we ended up even selling, we so ended up selling stores into the Middle East. I had stores in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. So yeah, it ended up to being a cool little business to be in. But you know, it's not, people look at it in the beginning and the end and they say, oh wow, what a, you know, what a great idea, what a great experience, a straight line to working. No, it was full of ups and downs and lefts and rights to get to the end. So a lot
So
of no business goes in this straight line. It might look
no,
like it in
no,
my
no,
it
no.
might, it might look like it on paper, but there's always some heartache along the way.
I saw a video on TikTok the other day where a guy was like, yeah, it really does take 10 years to do anything. He's like,
Yeah.
sometimes you think it doesn't take, you can do it a little bit faster, but no, it takes 10 years. It really
Yeah.
takes 10 years. And I thought that was so true
Does.
because, you think you can do these things, you think you can build a business or learn something or start something, but it's a long, 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 long road to make
Yeah.
anything worth doing, viable.
Make it work.
But
Yeah.
but but once what I've learned, and maybe you can attest to this too, is but once you do get that flywheel going, you know, it
Yeah.
starts moving on its own, which is a
It's
beautiful thing.
it's a beautiful thing. It's also a little scary too, because that's when you have to let go. You know, you have to let it spin on its own. And it's a little unnerving sometimes, especially if you're the starter of it. You know, it's but no, it is. It takes a long time. You know, when I started those most of my businesses in the past, it was kind of during that early tech era. And tech companies did go from nothing to these big companies pretty quickly. They were the anomaly, right? So you would compare yourself to the
Sure.
guy who was in a garage last year and now he's got 10,000 employees, and you're
Yeah, but
like, wow, how did they do that? But
yeah, but
that's
that's
not reality. That
no,
is not reality.
no, no,
So
not at all. And like, yeah, these tech companies used to not do layoffs, and look how that changed in the last few months. So, but so I see, so you became what I noticed on your profile when I was reading up on your history is you were the board member at Cannondale. You were a board
yeah.
member at Cannondale Bicycle from 97 to 2003. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was making tubes for Cannondale back in my first business, I became friends with Joe Montgomery, who was the founder of Cannondale. And even though I sold that business, my carbon fiber tube business, to somebody else, he and I stayed friends afterwards. So, and he was kind of, Joe's still alive. He's probably 19 years older than me, 18, 19 years older than me. And he was kind of this interesting mix of friend, mentor kind of person in my life that was, you know, really had a big impact on what I did. And so but I stayed friends with him. And then, and I had been working with Cannondale when Cannondale decided to go public. They needed a board of directors, and I at the time had my construction business, and I would just started the Sandella's business too. So they reached out to me and said, hey, we want some young entrepreneurial person on our board. Would you consider being on it? You know, I was young and honored at the time to do that. So I quickly accepted that, and I was on the board. Cannondale became a public company, and another great experience for me because I kind of rode the good times and the bad times of Cannondale during that period of time being on the board. But it was a great experience. I got exposed to, you know, the financing side of a bigger business. And I saw Cannondale go from, gosh, Cannondale was this tiny little company in Connecticut manufacturing bikes and other products down in Pennsylvania. And it grew to, I think at the time, 150, $180 million business. And it was fun to kind of partake in that and see that process. And then it ended up badly. I mean, Cannondale ended up getting diverted over into making motorcycles at the time, and that ultimately took the business down, and the company ended up filing bankruptcy and being bought by its lender. And the company survived bad business decisions. It survived, and Cannondale's probably 3 times that size today. So good
So you,
experience though for me,
so
good and bad.
what's a board member? What's a board seat? Like, what are you seeing on a regular basis at a company like Cannondale? Are you talking about distribution strategy, product strategy? Like, what is it like? What are some of the, and I know that's a really open question, but
Yeah.
like, what are some of the big pieces that you're looking at that you're seeing? Because like today, brands have, you have availabilities, cash flow, of course, having to make big orders, bets on new products, new lines,
Hmm.
distribution, own stores. I don't know if that was the thing back then, but like, what were some of the big things that you guys were gnawing on a regular basis in terms of strategy or in these boardrooms?
Yeah. At the time, well, there's some mundane jobs as a board member. You're either on the audit committee or the compensation committee. So, you know, the you're either working with the auditors, and that's, you're not all that involved, other than that you're selecting who the auditors are going to be, and maybe reviewing what they do. Compensation committee would be the same, top management salary and compensation packages. But the real nitty gritty on a board like that is, yeah, it's talking about the next. You go over the normal course of business. How are we doing now? What's going on now? And then it's the strategy of going forward, and what are you going to do when you down the road. And I think when Canada went from an extremely entrepreneurial company to a public company, and one of the things I learned in that process was, it became very quarterly focused on earnings rather than long-term focus on innovation. And Cannondale had been a hugely innovative company, aluminum mountain bikes, all the different things that they did at the time. I mean, they were really, really innovative company. And I think being public kind of took some focus off of that, into more focused on ongoing earnings. But we would strategize, and there were a lot of conversations about distribution. We were in US, we were in Europe, and we were in Japan. Those were our big markets at the time. And this is a flip-flop today. We were making everything in the US. We were making all of our bike frames in Bedford, Pennsylvania. We had a crew of young welders down there making frames, painting. It was a totally different environment than today in the cycling business. And so distribution was going the other way. We were shipping product to Europe, shipping product to Japan. And also, what were we going to do next, and how much money we were going to spend on R&D. And again, Cannondale had a history of being really innovative and plowing money back into the business. And then when the decision was made to start looking at other products, there was a big disagreement on the board about the direction to go. And the ultimate decision was to work on a motorcycle product, and a lot of R&D money got diverted into that product, and kind of diluted it a little bit from a bike company. And but then it did after it went through the bankruptcy process, it did obviously refocus and resurgence into cycling. But that experience as a board member there, I was a young guy, and I was, I was a sponge. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot of really useful things in that process. And not everything you learn is something good or what you should emulate or do. Some things you learn are things you in hindsight you should never do, or would do differently. So I think I learned a lot of those things in that experience early on that I use today. I mean, I think people ask me about my job today, and I say, my job today is all based on experience. That's what it is. It's not some class I took in school or some program I took in along the way. It's experience. So I highly value that experience that I had at that time with Cannondale. I got exposed to something as a young guy that a lot of people didn't get exposed to do.
So then in 2023, you came to work at ENVE.
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah. So I sold Sandella's in end of 2016, and I kind of quasi retired in 2017. And I didn't like that very much. I didn't like doing, I went from, it's really hard. I learned another lesson here though. You can't go from doing crazy work all day and then the next day you do nothing. It just doesn't work. It's not, I'm not made that way, and I don't think most people are. So I started to kind of dabble in other things. And what I ended up doing was I started doing some consulting work. And what I found during different consulting jobs was I liked turning things around. I liked going someplace that was a total mess and fixing it. And I found that really rewarding, and it drove me to get up every day and go work hard. So I liked that. So I started doing those consulting jobs, and I actually ended up with I had a consulting job that got me to move to Australia. I moved to Australia my wife and I moved there. We're in end of 17, early 18. We're going to go there for 5 years. And COVID came and kind of broke that up. So we didn't stay full 5 years. But I started doing consulting gigs around different places in the world, actually. And I really like doing turnarounds. And when I came back after COVID or during COVID, I came back to the US. And over time, I started putting feelers out for more and more, different turnaround jobs. And actually,
You had a network that was, I guess people are curious, like, I understand that you had a lot of experience, but how do you get into the consulting side of things? Was it just a network thing? Like, how did those jobs come
yeah,
about?
it's like everything else that's happened to me in my life. It's hard work and then a lot of luck, right? You get lucky. And my dad used to say to me, you know what, success is working really hard, hanging around long enough to get lucky, right? Because you got to stay in the game. But something else has to happen. And that's what happened in this case. I had a good friend who did this type of turnaround work, and he kind of advised me on some things to do. I actually hired a firm that did my LinkedIn profile, and
Wow.
they
You
they
you paid someone,
I
a firm, to do your LinkedIn profile. And what did they do?
it's amazing because yeah, that reaction was exactly what I had when my friend told me you should hire these guys to do this.
Well, I have a friend who does this, and
Yeah,
but she does it for, it's a little different. Like, so she does it for CEOs of like Fortune 1000 companies,
yep,
which they have the budgets to do it, because personal branding is super important. But for an
yep,
entrepreneur to do that, or for just like someone that's looking for consulting work, it's a, you're investing your own money into it. Where in this other case, that was why I was surprised, because in other cases, it's like, well, just we have our marketing budget, and to have a personal brand dimension to the CEO makes a lot of sense. But for you
hmm
to do that on your own, dip into your own, pocket and make that happen, that's interesting.
yeah. Well, it kind of came from both ends because I heard that from a friend of mine that was doing similar to what I wanted to do. And also my youngest daughter works as a recruiter in a tech company. And she told me how she was explaining to me one day how they hire people.
Right.
And they basically mine the data
Yeah,
in LinkedIn, right?
absolutely. Yep.
And I learned from her, it's all about keywords, it's all about, the algorithms that they use and how they search LinkedIn. And these recruiters have a methodology of
Sure.
recruiting out of LinkedIn. So this company that I used did that. They took my resume, they didn't make anything up. They didn't, they didn't create anything that I did. All they did was take what I did. They found some common threads, and they found, again, keywords, I guess you can say,
It's
and
positioning
put
though, at
them
the end of
into
the
the,
day, isn't it?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
positioning.
But I didn't position to get a carbon fiber job in the bicycle business, right?
No,
But
no,
if you
right.
Google, if you're a recruiter, which is who found me for this MV job, if you put in there carbon fiber, cycling industry, different things, I make the short list or I make the big list, whatever it is. And then but at least you make that cut, right? And then so that's how I got this job. I was contacted by a recruiter in Europe. Amer Sports is based in Europe, and they were looking for somebody to come on board with Envy. And they hired this recruiting firm. The recruiting firm found me, interviewed me, and then I was interviewed by the the guys in Europe that oversaw Envy at the time, and that's how I got the job. So it was kind of again, it's a odd way, sometimes windy road that you end up in a spot. But yeah, but it did what it took work too. I mean, I did invest and take time in doing the LinkedIn piece, and
Yeah.
it does take time to network
It
and
goes
to
back to the 10
to build
years,
a.
right? It goes back to the 10-year
Yeah,
rule.
it goes back to the 10 years. It totally does. Totally does. And especially in these jobs, like the job I have today, because it does require a fair amount of contacts elsewhere because you gotta have friends and people that you pick up the phone and talk to and ask them about issues and problems and get other advice, right? So you have to have built this network over time. And yeah, so I think it wasn't a straight line again to getting this job at MVU. But when I had looked at a lot of different jobs, whether they be in the hospitality business, or there were people that owned hundreds of Airbnbs. They were looking for somebody to come in and organize that business. And I looked at a lot of different things, and that nothing intrigued me. And then I got this first text through LinkedIn, and it said they were looking for somebody in the carbon fiber cycling business, and it was Envy. And I was like, wow, I want this job. This is the job I want. So yeah,
Well, at the risk of getting into, areas that maybe are privy, like are more sensitive topics, but I gotta ask, like,
yeah.
you, what was the mandate? Because I'm looking at your profile on LinkedIn and it says turnaround chief executive officer. What were
Yeah.
you turning around?
Yeah. Well, it's no surprise to anybody that the cycling business went through a really hard time during COVID. Massive boom, massive fall, and the cycling business is in a bad place these days. So, and Envy didn't avoid that. Envy
So
had gotten.
overstocks, cash flow. What was
Yeah,
the emergency?
emergency was negative cash flow, right? And a lot of it was built inventories, massive inventories, bigger than required.
So all the
They got a
money
lot of
was
money.
was
You
was
got
in the
all this
inventory.
money tied up in inventory.
Right.
You didn't throttle back fast enough on
Sure.
production, purchasing to respond to the industry. So you had another wave of product coming in. Your overheads were too high. The business hadn't been readjusted to the times. And so I was brought in with a mandate of stabilize the business, put a business plan together to grow it, and then help us decide whether we should sell the business or we can grow the business to be meaningful in our portfolio of other companies, which our sports has huge businesses that they own. Arc'teryx, Wilson, Solomon, they're big companies to try to catch up to with a little bike company. But yeah, so that was the mandate. Cut the bleed, stop the cash, stabilize the business, put a business model together that makes sense, and then help us decide whether we should sell it or grow it, or keep it and grow it.
And so you get in there, I imagine, operating room, everybody's running around. Well, not running around, but you're applying, your experience to this business to try and improve the situation. And then earlier this year, the news comes out that Envy was purchased by a local family office.
Yeah, well, yeah, family office. Yep, yep.
Okay.
Not they're private investors. They're not private equity guys. They're not looking to buy it, build it, and flip it. This is a long-term buyer. But yeah, so yeah, that was the process. I started at the end of January in 20. 2003, and then we closed on selling the business at last day of April, 1st of May. So it was a process.
And so now you're working with the new ownership to continue to build the business. And how does how does the market look right now?
Yeah.
Putting you on the hot
Well,
seat.
no, it's good. It's it's interesting. When I first got to Envy, it was I took a it was it's not easy walking into one of those jobs because basically usually in these jobs they're eliminating some jobs and then putting you into that slot. And it was the smaller the business, the harder that is because people are friends, so they basically just fired somebody's friend, and now who's this guy coming in here and running this thing? But what I noticed right away with with Envy as a company is that they have amazing products, and they have amazing people. It was just poorly run business, and so it was just business 101 to fix it. So it really, if it had if the product was bad or we didn't have any good employees, that would have been a nightmare. But it was just fixing the business side of it. And it
Like
takes time,
like
but we did.
operations? I mean, are we just saying like just sound
Yeah, I mean
operations?
fundamentals like, hey, we got twice as much inventory as we need, guys. Right? We got to get rid of this inventory. We're making twice as much product as we can sell, so we got to cut back on what we make. And we do have some key seats that we need to fill. I mean, Envy's always been a very product oriented, innovative product oriented company, but we brought in a seasoned CFO. We brought in a seasoned supply chain guy, a seasoned
Operations.
sales guy. Yeah,
Operations. Yeah.
so we had the product and we had all of that. We just didn't have the business piece. We just didn't have, as you say, the operational side of running the business. So, we went through a head count cut, and I right sized I've learned this the hard way. So don't do it little by little. Go in, figure out what you need to do, and do it. Get it over with, and then go forward because it's a lot easier that way than drip, 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 right? And so I went in, I figured out, not hard, but figure out the right size of the business, and we made the people changes, which were tough, but we did them. We moved, and then I got everybody together and said, "Okay, we're done. Right? This is it. We're right size business. We're done. Don't worry about your job. We're done. We're going to grow from here, but we got to figure it out. We got a lot of work to do." And so we did that, and we did change the business model in that Envy Envy had come out with a custom road bike, and they had some production frames that they had come out with, and so they were selling frames like they did other components. So just like they sold wheels, just like they sold handlebars, they sold frames. And one of the things we did is we changed and said, well, let's start selling a whole bike. Right? We have all the parts. We're unique in the bike business in some ways that we have all the components that we make ourselves. So we started making full bikes and selling full bikes little by little into the channels to essentially drive revenue for every sale. So instead of selling a set of wheels, we're selling a full bike. So it just changed the revenue per sale. And again, we got lucky in that, a couple things. One, they'd already been doing the frames. I didn't invent that. I just came along and changed the package, right? Sell them as piece. But these guys had innovated these frames over the last many years. I just happened to walk in when they were there. So, they already had done that. We got lucky too in that we were approached and offered the opportunity to be the wheel provider and sponsor the UAE cycling team. And so we got great exposure and notoriety on our wheels and components. They started using our handlebars, bar extensions. So we got great notoriety on the component side of our business. And then later last year, we were approached to do the same as a full bike with Total Energies, the French racing team. So we got to highlight our components and a full bike. So it quickly got people to understand, oh, MB also has a full bike. They're not just a component company anymore. So those two things happened, and they really, really did help solidify the business and the new strategy going in that direction of full bikes. And
That's a whole nother business though, Mike. Like, are you guys, or you're still kind of at at the beginning of that journey, because to get
Yeah.
distribution and to get, that's, I mean, it sounds like you're off to a really good start, but to have like to get to muscle your way into the bike categories is not an easy task.
It's not easy, but it's interesting. This little company based in Ogden, Utah, has global distribution. I mean,
Sure, of course. Yep,
we sell product in Australia, we
sure.
sell in New Zealand,
Yep. You're not
South
building it from
Korea.
zero.
We have it, right? And our customer is that really, really high-end enthusiast. And that customer wants the best product, and they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to seek it out. So what we have found with our product is the highest end, those high end customers want
Sure.
our product. So they'll go into their local bike shop and say, "Hey, can I get, an ENVE Melee? I do carry ENVE Melee." So, "Oh no, I have these other bike brands. Let me show you these." And the guy will say, "No, I want an ENVE Melee." So, we're pulling that sale through the
Sure.
dealer. We're not pushing it into the dealer. We're pulling it through. The customer goes and wants the ENVE product and is pulling it through. Now, has it been easy? No, but I think we have established a base of us being a full bike business, and our business is still based upon having the best wheels in the world. So we continue to focus. We're a little company. We don't have unlimited money, so we focus on our R&D and all this, focused on the best wheels in the world, and we continue to do that. And then we make a full bike, and that's a better business model for ENVE, to sell a full bike. And we have gotten that product out there. And I will say our sales this year are up considerably versus last year, and we're profitable. And there's not a lot that's I'm proud to say that. The people in the building should be super proud of what they've done.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty amazing what we've been able to do, but it's because the product is so great and the people behind it are so great that it just took a little realignment to push the business into the right direction. And I think the future is really bright for ENVE in spite of the market. I think the market's still really tough right now.
So I have to ask you, and if you don't want to talk about this, I totally understand. But what I'm seeing, since you're at the helm of this company and you're very, very near to what's happening in the market, what I'm seeing from my vantage point in Europe was that the biggest players have the most inventory still,
Yep.
and that they are devastating the market with the price policies that they are forced to do because they have cash flow issues.
Right. Well, I think, yes, I would say the industry's still in bad shape, and this industry still has a lot of inventory. I think that it's starting to work its way through, and it's starting to get better. I see some signs of that, but that's not the market we play in. And so our customer's not going to buy another set of wheels or a different bike because it's 40% off. They buy it because they're looking for the highest performance, the best product they can, and they have the ability to pay for it. So they're not price driven, they're performance driven.
You may
And
only suffer from the
we're unique in that regard.
sure, but
There's not a lot of us in the bike business today that are in that area, but we're lucky to be in that.
you're not exempt from the cash flow issues that maybe the dealers might have
No, for
because of
sure.
this.
So I think the bike business has changed. In some ways, the bike business hasn't changed at all since I
No,
was at Cannondale.
it
It's
hasn't.
amazing how it
Yeah,
hasn't changed,
it
right? But
hasn't.
in some ways it has changed, in that in the old days and up until a few years ago, people used to place a stocking order and then they take delivery of that product over the year to fill inventory or to fill demand. Today, dealers don't have the money to do that. So what they're doing, our business is more of a rolling order
So
business.
you have to make the investment. You have to risk.
We have to, you know what? But we've changed our business model. We don't do that anymore. We don't stock a big inventory and then hope to sell it. We're making and supplying product on a continuous basis. So it's more of a rolling business and peaks and valleys. And once we could fix our inventory and once we could rearrange our whole model to operate that way, we were fine. But we had to get rid of our inventory. We had to get rid of things like that too, to be able to get into that new model. And so we're past that bad stage, and we are into the stage of where we can have, and actually the business runs better, I think, as a continuity, with continuity. You know, you can produce at a flat level, and you build inventory, you reduce, you build, you reduce. But if you run the factory, you run your everything else at a steady state, it's a lot easier to do. But we were fortunate too with having Amer as our owner, because they wanted to fix the business and they were willing to invest in it. So one of the things that we did last year that took Amer's willingness to fund it, but also help the businesses. At the end of last year, we got a lot of inventory. We're trying to get full bikes out there. Dealers aren't going to buy bikes for the floor. We put together 1,500 demo bikes, and we basically sold them at, cost plus a little. And we got, thousands of bikes out into the shops worldwide that people could go in now and ride an ENVE bike, where in the past they had to go in and they go into the dealer, there's no bike to ride. You got to buy it on hope and a prayer, right? But now we've had bikes out there so people can go into a shop and ride an ENVE bike. And I've heard from people that have said, hey, I never really considered buying an ENVE bike. And I went into my shop and they had a Melee sitting there, or they had a Mog sitting there, and I took it for a ride and I bought an ENVE bike. And so that has had a huge impact on our business. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't Amer willing to fund us to do that. But that brought our inventory way down into a normal range, and it gave us a marketing edge in that we had product out there. So
What are you
yeah.
seeing, Mike, in terms of channel strategy in cycling? I know that brands that had like a big kind of size and color pressure distribution, were really kind of, we'll say, like eroded away out of the bike shops, because bike shops were like, we'll talk about clothing or shoes or helmets, where the bike shops were just sick of seeing it on sale on
Yeah.
Amazon. So they just said, look, we're just going to stock bikes and wheels, because those are the kind of things that give us good margin, and that probably helped. I'm sure that helped you guys, because the dealers sort of shifted away from those products. But I guess in terms of channel strategy, what are you seeing currently and in the future about
Yeah.
dealer online, we'll say online marketplace or online sales, and then direct to consumer? Can you talk about
Yeah.
that just a bit?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of back and forth, and the cycling business is a little unique versus, let's say, where our past ownership, Amer, was a soft goods company. It's a different strategy there too. So for us, it's a high-end customer with a highly technical product, and you got to buy it from a dealer. You got to buy it from somebody you can take it back and have it maintained. You can have it serviced.
Service is the key here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers, they pride themselves on being able to maintain their own bike in their own garage, and that's great. But there's always an issue somewhere along the line where they need a spare part or they need something. And so we really believe in the dealer network. And prior to this whole mess in the bicycle business, ENVE had really done a great job of identifying that they considered the best bike shops in the country, in the US and in Europe. And they considered them what we call ERCs, ENVE Ride Centers. So they have a little merchandising display in their store where they'd have our wheels and components and all. And they would be highly focused, and we would help and support those guys to the best of our ability. And so people would go to an ERC to buy ENVE products. And we are continuing on that model where we sell through the dealer network. Typically in the bike business, components have a higher margin than bikes have a lower margin, just because the dollars are different, right? And you sell a $10,000 bike, you can get a lower margin. We have a consistent margin, so we give the dealer the same margin on product across the board. So we're trying to work with the dealers too in terms of their needs on that from a financial standpoint. But even on it, so from our strategy right now is we sell through reps to dealers in the US. And we try to stay as close to the consumer as we possibly can in that model here at home. We have the saying, we win at home, right? We want to win at home. We want to win in the United States. That's our primary market. And that's our model here. We do have D2C, but what we find is people will buy spare parts, they'll buy, a handlebar, maybe a wheel set or something online. But what we do, and as we go over time, we're trying to push those sales to the dealer so that over time you'll see our website will say, hey, when you go to check out, they'll tell you who the ERC is within a certain distance of your house, so you could go buy it from them. So but there are customers that won't go in a shop and they want to buy product online. So you have to accommodate them too. But it's a small part of our business. It's not our core. And then outside of the United States, we're really focused on finding really strong distribution partners. So like in Europe, last year we consolidated all of our distribution through one distributor in France and Mohawks, and we rolled all of our reps up under Mohawk. So we now we have like a mini ENVE in France that we stock inventory.
Do you
We
own,
can
do
do
you, do you own
warranty.
that? Do you own that
No, we
business?
don't own
Oh,
we don't own it, but we are close partners. We operate them as kind of like like a mini ENVE. They have inventory, they have the ability to build wheels. They have a lot of capabilities there that allow us then to service that customer in Europe a lot better than we were trying to ship product from the US. And we have seen a huge growth in our European business, partially because of our sponsorships of these teams are driving awareness of ENVE products, but also we actually can deliver products quickly. We have it in stock, and we service the dealer network over there way better than we did. The customer always wanted our product there, but we didn't do a good job of getting product into the dealerships, and now we are. So our business in Europe has grown a lot in the last 6, 8 months.
yeah, it's funny because I felt so I've been in this business for I don't know about 12 years, and I
Yeah,
felt this kind of momentum was just pushing everyone towards D2C. And
yeah,
that was true for products that, clothing, helmets, shoes. It's true. There was a pretty much a conversion to D2C. Shops will keep clothing and they'll
yeah,
keep shoes and it'll sell, but there was a big shift to D2C. In bikes, it's sort of hit and miss.
right.
It's sort
I
of hit and
mean,
miss.
I mean, our bikes sell for more than what my first cars bought. First car I bought as a kid, right? They're expensive, and they're high tech. And I really, what do we buy online like that? I mean, I go back to
No, you're right. You're
okay,
right.
so I'm old enough to go back to the dot-com days when you could buy everything on. It was going to take over the world. You could buy
Sure.
everything online, anything.com. You could raise a ton of money back in the day, right? But that's changed. I know people don't. Our product is our high-end bike product is not something that is readily purchased online, because our customer, for us to be able to do that successfully, we have to decide what you want, right? We have to say, this is our bike, this is the bar on it, this is the drivetrain on it, these are the wheels. That's not our ENVE customer. Our ENVE customer wants to build a semi-custom bike, even when it's a off the shelf. They want to pick, okay, I want a Melee, but what wheels do you want on it? What drivetrain do you want on it? What bars do you want on it? What saddle do you want on it? And so by buying a bike from us at a dealer, you can do that. You go in and pick and choose everything that you want, and the dealer puts the bike together and delivers it to you.
Sure.
If we're going to ship D2C, it's coming in a box. I can't send you a box of components. You can't put it together. So I have to kind of pre-select what you're going to get. And that's not really the ENVE customer today. The ENVE
Sure.
customer today is the person that first bought our custom road bikes, where everything was customized, to now our production bikes, which are really semi custom. So it's not really a strong, it will never eclipse our dealer type business.
Right, right. No, the dealer, I think, long story short is, the dealer's here to stay. For anyone that thought that, okay, everything's going to go online, we're not seeing that. We're really not
No,
seeing that. It's the
but I
dealer
do
is,
think I do think the dealers, though, are the only the best dealers are going to make it. I mean, it's a tough business, right? And they have to, the bigger guys, not just the bigger guys, the guys that run their business like a business as a cycle shop, they're not in it just because they like to ride bikes. It's a business, and they have to be able to manage your inventory and cash flow. They have to provide high-end service. They have to do all of that. So I think that the dealer model's here to stay, but I think the game has been the bar's been raised on being a good dealer.
Sure. So you mentioned you'll be in Italy for the tour or for the Giro. We don't want to jinx Mr. Pogacar, but it looks like he should be coming across the line with Envy Wheels, winning
Yep.
the Giro. Fingers crossed.
We're hoping, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah. With that, I guess I won't be in Rome to see you, but potentially we'll see each other at the tour. But thank you so much for coming on today, Mike. It was super great. You've been candid, you've been really forthright, and I've really enjoyed this. And I think people are going to take a lot of value to be able to see, inside of your journey with Envy and whatnot. So thank you very much for that. If people want to reach out to you, get in touch with you guys, where's the best way to reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's
Okay.
a good place to find me. It's probably the easiest way. All my contact information, email, and all is on there. So it's probably the easiest way to find me. It's just find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It was
All
wonderful
right.
talking.
Thank you. Thank you, Wyatt. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you.